Hey, what's up, YouTube? Nick and Shane here from the Real Hero Show to talk to you about a movie on Netflix that came out last month in December called The Power of the Dog, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. Shane, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. It's a little chilly here, but
Yeah, it's pretty cold here too.
yeah, I've got a hoodie on. Although I might take it off because it's getting hot inside my apartment. So
All the lighting.
yeah, no, all the
All that
lighting and
beautiful
computers are
lighting.
just making it a lot hotter. But yeah, so what we're gonna do for this movie is we're going to do a non-spoiler section and then a spoiler section. So in case of those of you who haven't yet seen this movie but are interested in seeing it based on what people are saying, and maybe you want to check it out first and then watch the movie and come back and see the spoiler section. So um to kick it off, again, this movie is on Netflix, so you don't have to go to the movies or pay to watch it, although it is only in Netflix, so
Yep.
you couldn't go to the movies and watch it at any time. But as far as how this did in the awards for Golden Globes, it did win Best Motion Picture. It also won Best Director for Jane Campion, or yeah, I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Um, and then Best Supporting Actor by Cody Smit-McPhee, who plays the kid Peter or Pete in the movie. So, and again, I know that there were some other big pictures, big directors on hand, and as good as Benedict Cumberbatch was, as you and I were just discussing, Will Smith was the one who took home um, uh, Best Actor.
Yep.
So, and of course, Will Smith's got certainly got some chops for that. So,
Yeah, and
um,
he's great in King Richard. If you haven't seen that one either, it's worth checking out. His performance is really, really good.
yeah, absolutely. As far as the scores go, IMDb was basically gave it a 7 out of 10, with about 79,000 user ratings reviews in it. Looking at Rotten Tomatoes, the critic scores were 94%, audience score is 83%, and if you want to look at Metacritic, we got an 89 and a 7.2 from users. So, just talk about the non-spoiler section. Again, it was an interesting movie.
Yes.
You know,
Interesting is probably the best word I can use to describe this movie.
yeah, I remember when you said, "Hey, check it out." I'd wanted to see it, and I just didn't get a chance last month.
Yeah.
Of course,
I
was
think there's going to be a lot of people watching this that saw it win at the best that it win at the Golden Globes
yeah,
and are now suddenly interested in it. And it's like, oh, Benedict Cumberbatch, blah blah blah. Like I should check this out. And that's what
yeah,
I was too. I hadn't caught it yet until I saw that, and it drove my interest to the film.
gotcha. Yeah, and for a 2 hour, I think it was just over 2 hours long, like 2 hours and 5 minutes or something like that. But for a solid 2 hour movie, it was good. And it did seem to move slow, but at the same time, it it kept you thinking, what's how is this all going to develop into something, you know,
Yes,
and obviously, and this isn't a spoiler by any means, but Benedict Cumberbatch is a dick in this
yes,
movie.
he,
It's
he
really,
plays gigantic asshole. That's his
yeah,
character.
yeah, it's really different to see him play this sort of role, and but man, he did a great job because I'm like, dude,
I
you're
hate
being a
him.
complete asshole
Yeah,
right now, man. Like
yeah.
you need to simmer the fuck down. But yeah, he did a great job. He was nominated, but and I can see why. And there's a lot, uh, some great shots, cinematography wise in this movie. It takes place around 1925, the year 1925.
Yep.
So they've got
It's shot in
electricity.
Montana, I believe it was shot on location. It's meant to be in Montana, and as
Okay.
somebody who just went to Montana, I can attest it's just a beautiful state. But
Yeah.
yeah, all
Scenery
the
looked great.
cinematography and everything was beautiful.
Yeah,
Best thing I
absolutely.
can say about this movie overall is, like, it's well shot, it's well
Yes.
directed, it's well acted, but it's very boring. And I'm not one to say that about movies very often because, like, I've seen a bunch of movies where not a lot happens. And that's
Right.
not necessarily what I'm saying by meaning it's boring because, like, I'm not saying like, "Oh, there's no action." Like, I don't care about that. Like, I've
Right.
seen movies with people in a room and they're interesting, but this one, it keeps you in the dark as to what kind of movie it is for almost the entire film.
Hmm.
Like a lot of the time, the audience is not really cued in on what to pay attention to, who to root for, who to care
Right.
about,
Right.
and that to me is what made it boring. A lot of stuff is happening on screen, but I don't know as an audience member what to care about. And you finally start to, unravel the mystery of what this movie is as you go along, and it all
Yeah.
kind of comes together, but as you're watching it, it's a slow burn to get there.
It is, and I mean, for the sake of the other characters, right? Phil, the character that Benedict plays, his brother George,
Yeah.
who is very well composed, very well dressed, very up with the times, um, in the city, right? He's well more established. He's washed up, and he's the complete opposite of Phil
Yeah.
and as brothers, and very very kind, very chivalrous, and Phil is just not it at all. And I
Yeah.
didn't I knew that Jesse Plemons was in it, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, like, man, he has come such a long way since
Yes.
I first saw him in
Yeah.
Breaking Bad. Like,
Yeah. I think
it's
Friday
it's
Night
great.
Lights was actually
His first one.
technically he was in, is it Like Mike? I'm
Mm,
pretty sure he's in Like
yeah,
Mike. He's
yeah,
the bad guy in Mike, like the rotten kid.
yes,
Uh,
yes, yes,
yes, and then
yep,
Friday Night Lights, and then Breaking Bad, and
right.
yeah, I mean, he's come a long way. He was in Jungle Cruise recently too.
Yes, I was like, I actually just watched that again recently, and so just seeing him, he was the, one of the Nazi guys, the main villain in that
Right,
Jungle
right.
Cruise,
Yep.
but yeah, he was great in this,
Yeah.
obviously talking about Kirsten Dunst, I thought it was a little funny and just oddly ironic that she also has another character that she has to yell Peter to, since,
Oh, yes, that's
Spider-Man.
true. I didn't even catch that connection.
Yeah, I don't know if she might have thought about that as well, but she's like yelling, "Peter! Peter!" And I'm
Yeah.
like, I wonder if that brings back any sort of memories, especially with, all of the, recent Spider-Man,
Yeah.
rave. And she even said, I think it's a side topic, but she even said that she would like to reprise her role, of Mary Jane and be in another Spider-Man movie, which
She said
I mean,
something about, like, they don't give roles to people my age anymore or something like that. I think I remember her saying something like that.
yeah, but, I don't know, maybe we'll see, but I mean, she was great in this,
She was good.
yeah, definitely good, and then her son, Peter,
Yeah.
he played a very, um, uh, you know, a lonely boy, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like, he, um I hate to say it, but as the Cowboys and the ranch called him, a little Nancy. He portrayed that role exceedingly well,
Yeah.
and again, you really felt empathetic for what he's had to go through as you
Yeah.
learn more of the story. And of course, Phil is a complete asshole to him, um,
And
and
everyone, really.
and everyone, of course, but his own brother, uh, you know, uh, what's her name? Rose, Kirsten Dunst's character, Rose.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend people to watch this movie, for multiple reasons, like you said, cinematography, acting. It won some awards. So if you take any awards with a grain of salt, then I would say like this definitely lives up to its appreciation, and
See,
and it's free.
yeah, I would give a cautious recommendation if
Yeah,
you're the
yeah, yeah.
type of or if you're the type of movie watcher that can sit down and watch a movie for 2 hours where not a lot of things happen and you're okay with just characters talking, uh, then I think you'll find an enjoyable movie in here. As you're watching it, you may not be entertained. I don't think it's a very entertaining movie.
It's not.
It's very well crafted, but not necessarily entertaining. While I was watching this movie, I was just kind of like trying to process everything, not necessarily enjoying myself. But as as the movie rounds out into this cohesive whole, you start to realize that it's a very well crafted story.
It is,
uh,
and
and
I
it's
think
tough because like I can totally see somebody wanting to turn this off 30 minutes in.
yes, I agree with you, and I felt like at one point, I did look at my phone a couple times. Um, uh, one of them was to reply to a comment on the channel here,
Nice.
but at the
Thanks
same
for
time,
getting them.
like, yeah, yeah, and I guess it was just sort of one of those things. I'm still listening. I'm still paying attention to what's going on in the movie, and I think, like you were mentioning, if there's something I'll pin on the end of that, it's you want to keep watching. Again, I'm keeping this part spoiler free because again, there is a story here,
Yes.
and if you want to see how this story is written and actually to see where it goes, then you really have to watch all the way through.
Yes. Yes.
And again, like it might surprise you. You might go, I'm actually glad I didn't turn it halfway off, or
Yep.
again, maybe you stopped 30 minutes in and then you watched our video here and went, you know what? I'm actually glad I went back and watched it because of something that you'll save. We're saving for the spoiler section. So I
Yes.
mean, look, you'll have to find out. But
I think
anything
that's
else
a
for the
good
non-spoiler
segue.
part?
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Let's talk about the spoilers because I like when I recommended this movie to you, it was
Oof.
so that we could discuss this because
Yep.
it's such a discussion worthy movie, I think. And so if anyone
100%.
has not finished the movie or seen the movie, please turn this video off right now. We are going to
Yep.
talk spoilers.
Yep.
Um, but the type of movie that this is a revenge story. And
Yes.
I had no clue where it was going
Same.
95% of the movie.
Same.
And then you get to the end, you're like, oh, okay, okay.
Y-
Now it starts to like it clicks in your brain and you reprocess everything you've been watching for the last 2 hours.
Yep.
It starts to make sense. And me thinking, like, I'm such an idiot because I've seen so many movies and I know one of the golden rules of movies is if you get narration right before the movie starts, that's usually very, very important to what the movie is about. And
Yep.
the opening narration is like, I have to protect my mother at all costs. And I should have fucking remembered that.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought for a good minute there that f- um that Phil was trying to really eat away at Rose by you know taking her son away from her, and I think he does that, and especially when they're running off and George is like, no, it's fine, like they're buddying up today,
Right.
and she's like running out, Peter,
Yep.
Peter,
Yep.
and the same time he Phil is like slowly chipping away at Peter by saying like your mother's been hitting the sauce, and it's like, what's that mean? Like, hitting the bottle, hitting the booze, she's an alcoholic, and I thought for a second he might have had like like a grain of compassion when he
Yeah.
finds out how his father died and that he was the one who found him as after he hanged himself,
Yeah. And
and
I
it,
think that compassion is there. I think it's meant to be there. I think
yeah,
sort of his progression is opening himself up to this kid.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I think, obviously earlier on when they first meet, Peter just has this, like this lasting memory that's like puddling there of this guy is an asshole to me. He makes
Yep.
fun of me. He picks
Yep.
on me. I'll get back at him when I get a chance. But I think as Phil was trying to do that, I think maybe along the way he realized, you know what, like we start to hear the story behind um from his past. He's like, yeah, I wasn't about your age until I met I can't think of the guy's name with the saddle.
Bronco something.
Bronco something, yeah.
Bronco
And
Harden, I think is his name. Bronco Harden. I think
I'm
that's
just
right.
gonna yeah, I'm just calling him
It's
Bronco,
like the
but
most like cowboy name of all time.
yeah, yeah,
Bronco Harden.
super, yeah, because it was kind of funny, but and again,
Bronco
it's
Henry. That's what it is. Bronco
Bronco.
Henry.
Yes, there we go. So Bronco Henry. Again, yeah, such a cowboy name. uh Bronco Henry was this sort of father figure and more, right? Like he's asking, like,
Yeah.
because were you naked? And he didn't answer yes, and he didn't
Yeah,
answer
there's
no.
very much an implication that there was sort of a lover a fair type of relationship there.
Yeah, little Brokeback Mountain,
Yeah,
if
and I
you
thought that's
will.
what this movie was turning to. I
Same.
thought that's where it was going,
I'm like,
and it
oh,
was not.
yeah, like he was, he didn't really like Peter at first, but then he's like, oh my
Right,
god, he's just a younger version of me, and this is going to be like take two where I'm Bronco Henry now,
right,
and
exactly. Yep,
that's where I thought I was going.
yep.
Uh and damn,
Not quite.
we were fucking fooled. I was
Yeah,
like, oh shit, what?
yeah. So I think we should talk about the ending because
Yes,
I know that like it's very subtle
it
and
really
maybe
is.
explain what happens. So
Yes,
yeah, we find out in the end that Phil's death is because of anthrax.
right,
And George is like, no, he didn't ever handle the diseased cows. Like, there's no way he could get anthrax. Well,
right.
if you're sort of watching this plot thread develop over the course of the prior 20-ish minutes or so, he
Yeah,
kind of figures out how he's going to kill him.
yep,
It's he gets the hides from the diseased cow, and
yep.
then when his mom gives away all the hides, Phil is like
He's left with nothing.
enraged, and he's gonna
Yeah.
go crazy. And then Peter says, I have the hide. And since he's kind of opened up that soft spot for
Mhm.
Peter, he's now like you know happy and like, oh my gosh, you would do that for me.
Yep,
And then it shows the scene of them making the rope, and his cut on his hand
yep,
is in the water with
yep,
the diseased hide, and
yep.
that's how he dies.
I was
And it
wondering, I'm
was
like,
very
why.
intentional.
Yeah, I'm like, why are they showing this scene? Like, there's like, I get it. It's sort of one of those shots you would put in a movie, but I'm like, th- there's something else
I
to
thought it was
this.
supposed to be, like, super erotic,
Right,
and it
right.
wasn't.
No, like, something that like, yeah, some sort of metaphor where like he's using the spare cut hides from Peter, and like his had the hand on his cut is like a metaphor for like him opening himself up, and like Peter kind of getting in there, like and obviously how that whole scene plays out, talking
Yeah,
with Bronco Henry, and and then he
the
this whole
smoking s
smoking,
yeah,
yeah, and he's like putting his cigarette or
yeah,
those cigarettes to Phil's mouth, and instead of handing it to him and doing it, and there's this smirk on Peter's face, like, right at the very end, and I'm
yes,
like, "Why did he do that?
yep,
Like, what's the power move here?" And sure enough, that next scene
yep,
when we're just like, "Where's Phil? Phil didn't come down for breakfast yet?" And he's in bed, and he's like, "Oh, we need to go to the you know, I'll bring you into town." And his hand's looking pretty gnarly even at that
yeah,
point.
yeah,
And I'm like, oh, his hand's infected. Like he hasn't taken care of it.
right,
Maybe he's ill from the infection. Of course, thinking that was pretty logical, because I mean, if you've ever played uh oh god, what was the old game, the old
or, like,
computer
Oregon
game, or
Trail,
Oregon Trail?
yeah.
Yeah, people died from like a cut.
Dysentery, yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, that's all. I'm like, oh shit, they're going full Oregon Trail in this
right,
movie here. Great. uh but it just cuts the scene, and it's like boom, coffins. I'm like,
yep.
he's dead.
Yep, and it's
The
so
fuck.
unceremonious too.
Yeah,
Just we've been, spending our whole movie with this character, and he just dies out of
yeah,
nowhere, and then, of course,
so
they
sudden.
explain it.
Right.
But one thing that a couple things I found interesting about that whole ending was, I think there was sort of a metaphor in the death, because it was by building like, weaving a rope,
Yes.
and his father died by hanging himself,
Yep.
correct?
Yes, he did.
So it's in some ways connected that both of these men were killed by a rope,
Yep.
right? So there
Yep.
was that metaphor. There's a line in the movie. Well, first off, like one of the first scenes in the movie is they introduce anthrax, right,
Yep.
to the character.
Yep.
They show a scene of him castrating a bull with no gloves, and they mention that he's not wearing gloves, and like, oh, why don't you use gloves? And he's like, oh, I don't need to, blah blah blah. So they're kind of like sprinkling these hints all along, but like you don't really know why until after the
Yep.
fact. There's a line in there where he says like it's under A in the doctor manual or whatever, the dictionary, something like that. I forget what it's called. But
Yeah.
anthrax is also under the letter A.
Yep.
So that's another little hint.
Yep.
And so I thought it was built up pretty well. The only thing I didn't like was this felt like a movie where the surprise nature of the ending actually kind of worked to the film's detriment as you're watching it. I feel like had we been clued in a little bit earlier or maybe like beaten over the head a little bit more, not too much. I appreciate subtlety, but like the audience is not along for the ride until the end, kind of.
Yep.
Uh, and and it wasn't necessarily tension as much as it was surprise. Uh, and so I feel like had you built up a little bit of tension and maybe clued us in a little bit more on what we're watching earlier, then we'd start to make sense of it. Like if the kid is the protagonist, give us a little bit more of you know of him in the movie, especially because as I mentioned, that hint in the beginning was I'm going to protect my mother, and then like he
Yeah.
disappears off screen for like a good 30 minutes.
He does.
Like you don't see him, and so you kind of forget about him.
Yeah, and uh, I think for the sake of cluing the audience in a little bit more, maybe around the time where he's dissecting the rabbit, you know, that might have been a good spot to kind of show him like reading through uh, with the medical dictionary, right, and seeing like
Right.
maybe the
And
page
he
was left in
does,
A's.
yeah, something
He
like
looks
that.
at it, we see him, but
Yeah.
he and one of the things that, I tried to find a comb, to mimic his
Yeah.
comb thing noise, but,
Yep.
um, he always did it when he was, like, thinking a certain like, there was some sort of thought he was, processing kind of even when he's looking in the book and he kind of gets this idea, right? His mother's
Mhm.
talking to him. He's got this idea. Phil is talking to him. He's got this idea, like when they're on the field or whatever. And I, I, I I think the good part would have been again in the dissecting phase or scene, the books kind of like on the letter A. Or something that had anthrax on the page, and maybe not like
Right.
dead center on the word,
Right.
but like just like off enough so that it's not completely blurred out, but you can still see it in there for medical terminology. And
Yeah,
then
it
going, why is he looking at anthrax? Like, oh,
right.
but wait a second.
Yes.
Phil said in the beginning of the movie that the dead carcasses have anthrax on them.
Right. There were a lot of breadcrumbs in the movie, but it was
Yeah.
almost impossible to follow them.
Yeah.
'Cause they were all kind of sprinkled in there. There were hints and, like, in the end, it all makes sense, but as you're watching the movie, you just don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And, like,
Yep.
and you don't know what to care about. Like, obviously, the protagonist is this gigantic asshole, so, like, why would I care about
Not gonna
him?
care about him, right?
The mom is being tormented, but, like, doesn't really show much, moving the action forward. Like, she's not an active protagonist. She's kind of just there to be this, like I don't know, tormented person.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sidekick to Benedict Cumberbatch's character. It's like his foil.
Right.
But and so we're thinking, Benedict Cumberbatch is this main character. The main character is the kid, and
Yep.
you never really get that in this movie. And I feel like we needed more time with him and stuff like that to really start to make sense of where that story was going.
Yeah,
George
I
certainly
agree.
isn't. He disappears too. Like people just disappear in this movie for like 30 minutes and then they come back. It's like, oh, they're not dead. They're alive. Okay.
Yeah, and I think in some cases there was this, just pure coincidence of how things ended up for Phil. Like it
Yeah.
just so happened that uh, she ran off and was like, no, 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 take the hides, and then gets these
Right.
like gloves that were just so
Right.
deliciously soft. That was kind of funny, um, but it's like, what if she'd never given
Right.
hides away?
It's
Like
and so maybe that
there's a
was
big
part of the
foil,
plan? I
right,
don't
right,
know. But yeah,
like
I agree that the plan came together very conveniently for him.
yep,
Uh, and I mean, maybe they were gonna do the rope thing anyways. I'm not sure. Also, by the way, the comb thing, I thought that like during that scene where she was like, "Is there a sound you can't deal with?" And he starts doing the comb. Is that meant to be like the rope, like the hanging rope? Like it
it
kind
might
of
be.
sounds like a creaking rope a little bit.
It might be, yeah, that's a good. That's a good observation
I
'cause
wasn't sure if that was
I
intentional or
I
not.
can hear it though, but I mean, it makes sense, I think, like the creaking of the rope tied as there's a, dead body,
Right. Right.
kinda
Haunted
swaying from it.
mansion kinda thing.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Um, and
yeah,
then also
again
the rabbit scene was interesting to me. I like that you brought that up because I think it's a good metaphor because, like, it showed him being very kind to the rabbit
mhm.
before brutally killing it, which is
Yeah.
exactly what he does to Phil later. He's very kind to him before brutally murdering him. So it
Yeah.
kind of shows it gives you the little hint early on that he's kind of a psychopath.
Yeah, and I think for the sake of, Peter being set in this vengeance mode, like, there's no turning back, like, "You'll never replace my father," even if that's what you're trying to be, just more so, like, I found that I can be kind to you and exploit that weakness and and, you know, catch you with your pants pants down, I guess.
Yeah.
No pun intended, even though he chases him, naked,
Yeah.
uh, as he's, like, bathing in the lake or whatever it is, and I'm like,
Yep.
"That's a
Yeah.
scene."
We also got
Um,
full frontal Cumberbatch, so
yeah,
that was
yeah,
interesting.
for the fans out there that are like,
We should have put that in the non-spoiler, like,
yeah,
if you're gonna watch this movie for one reason,
yeah, if you
full
wanna see
frontal Cumberbatch.
yep, yep, there we go. Oh, man.
Um, but yeah,
Um,
one last thing before we kinda wrap up, I wanted to mention that the scene with the piano and the
the
banjo
banjo, oh god,
was really, really well done,
it
and if
was
you watch
good.
that on, like, a full surround sound
I did,
system,
yeah.
it sounds really, really cool because the banjo is coming from behind you and the piano is coming from in front of you, and I thought
Yep.
that was just really well done.
Yeah, you get the sense of her being downstairs and then, Phil being upstairs, like,
Right.
and just, it playing through, like, the floors,
Yeah, I
and,
thought that
oh
was really
god,
cool.
that was so good. Whoever I mean, I'm pretty sure that's not Benedict playing the banjo,
Don't know.
but,
Maybe he learned it.
yeah, maybe he just went full method acting on that, but,
Yeah.
yeah, that whole scene was great too, so, um, yeah, again, I think that, if you avoided some plot convenience, maybe showing them hatching the plan together, like, "Hey, like, I've got anthrax," sort of thing, maybe, and, yeah, if we can get the hives away, it puts them in desperation, you know, um, I don't know, because
Yeah, I think it needed a little bit more
just
tension,
yeah,
a
just a
little bit
little
less
bit more.
surprise, a little
Right.
bit more hand-holding, and I hate asking that of movies because I always hate when movies handhold too much, but this
Too
one I
much,
think
right.
handheld a little bit too little. It
Yeah.
felt like so it's based off a book. It felt like
Yes.
reading the book would have worked better than watching it as a movie, and I'll
Yeah.
have to maybe read the book, but I feel like maybe some of the experience is diminished because I know the ending.
Right,
But it
right.
felt like something where like a book would be much more apt to sort of develop a lot of those ideas going forward, and
Yeah.
maybe kind of give you I don't know what tense it's written in, but like maybe give you a little bit of their thoughts behind what's going on. So
Right.
not sure, but yeah,
Yeah.
overall solid movie. I don't know if it was like
Agreed.
a standout best picture winner for me, but I did enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I did too. And I mean, what do you think you would give it per rating?
I'd go with like an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree, with essentially what the audience per,
Yeah,
Rotten
about
Tomatoes have given it.
83. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good score, a good average for it. So, but yeah, I think that'll do it for us covering The Power of the Dog on Netflix, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. If you have seen it, go ahead and share your thoughts about the movie. What'd you think about the character performances, the scenes, the cinematography, the twist, the plot convenience, or just the whole plot and story overall. And until next time, we will catch you guys on. We have to do a movie review on Macbeth, so stay tuned for
Yep.
that. And I've got a bunch of other shit to cover too, so
Yeah.
stay
We
tuned
got
for
Boba Fett again.
Boba Fett coming soon.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see how that turns out. Maybe it'll be more rantiness from us. So until then, we'll catch you guys in the next video.